The meeting is now live.
Good afternoon, everyone. I don't know whether you can hear me over the absolutely incessant rain outside, which is bouncing off the roof. So hopefully you'll hear me over that. Can I welcome all those present and, of course, all those watching this remotely. And this Combined Authority meeting will be broadcast live to the CA website and available for subsequent viewing. Can I ask that members and officers please ensure that when you wish to speak that you'd indicate in the chat box, because we don't have the raised hand. And of course, when you're invited to speak, can you remember to unmute? And if only we had £1 for every time we've all forgotten to unmute, our budget issues would be eased this year. Finally, can everyone ensure that their phone is switched to silence, please? And for the record, I'll now ask each of the members to confirm that they are present. So these are the voting members first. Councillor Pohill, can you confirm that you're present?
Present.
Councillor Mayor?
Yep, present.
Councillor Morgan?
Present, Chair.
Councillor Baines?
Present, Chair.
Councillor Williams?
Present, Chair.
And Councillor Simons?
Present, Chair.
Great. Can I do the same with the non-voting members? So Asif Hamid, can you confirm that you're present?
Present, Chair.
And Councillor Robinson?
Good afternoon, present, Chair.
Great stuff, full house. Now, it is our first meeting of the new year, but I think for many people, it's simply been a continuation of the awfulness that was 2020. And so maybe it is a new year, but not a happy new year. So instead, I'd wish everybody a healthy and safe 2021. And with that, we pay tribute to all those who obviously have lost their lives in the pandemic over the last 12 months or so, and those that continue to live with the consequences of this horrible disease. Before I start the business of today's meeting, it is with great sadness that we learned of Jerry Marsden's passing on the 3rd of January. Now, Jerry and the Pacemakers were one of the biggest success stories of the Merseybeat era, and they were the first band ever to have their first 3 records go to #1. For many of us who've used our world famous Mersey ferries, we will have heard them and possibly sung along badly to Ferry Across the Mersey. And for those of us who are lucky enough to frequent a certain terrace, his version of You'll Never Walk Alone is an anthem that is recognised around the globe. Now, I feel fortunate to have known Jerry and to become a close friend of his. Last Saturday, I attended his funeral, and the numbers were, of course, limited because of COVID restrictions. But Jerry's family are hoping that we can hold a memorial service later in the year. I'm forever grateful for Jerry's friendship and for his steadfast support, and I'll miss him greatly. So can we, on behalf of the City Region, first of all extend our deepest condolences to Jerry's wife Pauline, to Yvette, Vicky and Jerry's wider family, and also their many fans and friends. And can I ask that we join together in a minute's silence to Jerry Marsden, MBE, Freeman of the City of Liverpool. Jill?
Okay, Mr. Mayor. Okay, Mr Mayor.
I don't know whether everyone could hear the sound effects in the background there, which takes you back, doesn't it, to being at the pier head and watching the ferries coming in with the seagulls or flying around. Appropriate. Okay, so also, if I can just thank Liverpool City Council for awarding a posthumous award of Freeman of the City to John Haynes, whose death we spoke about in December. He died from motor neuron disease, and we reported on that. He would have loved to have been recognised in this way, so thanks to Liverpool for that. Item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence, and this is Trudy. Are there any apologies?
Thank you, Metro Mayor. We've received apologies from Councillor Sinnott, Gideon Benthoven, Councillor Bowden and Councillor Robertson Collins.
Are there any further apologies? No? Okay. Item 2 is declarations of interest, and this is an opportunity for members to declare if they have any. Item 3 are the minutes of the previous meeting of the Combined Authority, and they were held on the 18th of December 2020. They're included in pages 1 to 10. Can they be agreed, please?
Agreed. Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 4 is the updated announcements, and really I just wanted to perhaps use this to talk about vaccination and to touch on the programmes which are being rolled out across the city region. And I think we're delighted that coronavirus vaccines are making their way into people's arms across the city region and beyond. It doesn't need to be spelt out though just how important this is, or how it represents the start of our escape from this awful virus. And after such a terrible start of the year, we all need hope, don't we, and that things will improve for us all. So I want to pay tribute and thank everyone who's taken part in this massive effort, from, of course, our local authorities, our NHS staff, key workers, right the way through to everyone who's volunteered, and we've had brilliant people having me doing that freely, and those who are doing the right thing by also being vaccinated. And I actually went to a vaccination centre in Sefton with Bill Esserson MP shortly after Christmas to see how things were progressing. And it's just an incredible operation, and people are working flat out to get as many people inoculated as we possibly can. Earlier this month, I wrote to the Health Secretary to reaffirm our willingness to work with the government, you know, our NHS, our key partners, and everybody else, all working together with government to get our region vaccinated as quick as we possibly can, and to urge him to take the advantage of the existing logistical infrastructure that we've built, the expertise and capacity that we have, so that we can get as many people vaccinated as possible. And we built that up during the mass testing pilots. I also requested that the government open at that time a mass vaccination hub in our city region, as they've done in other areas. We were being left behind at that stage. But I'm glad that my letter was positively received, and I've also spoken directly to the Health Secretary on a number of occasions, who's been receptive to working more closely with us as we roll things out. And thanks to the leader of St Helens Council and the MPs there, I'm pleased that the Wicket Stadium is the first mass vax hub, but we are looking to open more, perhaps one more central, and we'll wait for that to be confirmed. Of course, community vaccinations are still happening, but these hubs offer that greater capacity to vaccinate a larger number of people in one place, and just another tool in our armoury. They don't take away or detract from all the great stuff that's happening, they enhance it. And I'm sure that we'll all be keeping a close eye on that rollout of vaccines. We've today had an update from one of our directors of public health, and, you know, fingers crossed that we are able to keep on ramping up the supply and getting as many people vaccinated as quickly as possible. And the sooner we do that, perhaps it's the sooner that we can return to something resembling normality. So again, it's from all of the leaders across the city region and myself. It's thanks to everybody who's really pulled out all the stops and is doing such sterling work. Item 5 then, which is the main item, it's the approval of the Mayoral Combined Authority budget for 2021-2022, and the budget is being put forward at a time of, as we've just said, great uncertainty after what's been a uniquely challenging year, not just for our city region and the 1.6 million people who call it home, but for everyone around the country. But given the impact of those government spending cuts and review that's being carried out to our local authorities' budgets, and how difficult it's been for them so far this year, with so many people in our city region, having huge problems about knowing whether they were even going to have a job to go back to and what rate they would be paid for that job, or the furlough scheme, then we believe that it's not the right moment to add to the burden facing local residents. So this year we're proposing to freeze the tunnel tolls. Tunnel tolls are currently at the lowest, I think, for 2 decades or more. The mayoral preset, which hasn't gone up for 3 years, and the transport levy for 2021-2022. And it's not a decision that we're taking lightly. The reality is that COVID continues to create significant financial pressures for local authorities, but also for the Combined Authority, and it's exacerbating existing issues and black holes that we've all got. So we need the government to step up to the plate, and its broken promises. Remember, it said whatever it takes, and then it's really responded in whatever we'll give you, but that's caused great difficulty on the back of all the historic inequalities, a decade of austerity which hit our area the hardest, the legacy of underfunding services in the north in favour of the south. And that means that the issues that are systemic and fundamental to us being able to do some of the things that we want to do. So it means that there's still difficult decisions ahead for us all, but I'm committed to doing everything that I can to help our city region through the crisis, and I've shown that where we have to, we will take those tough decisions, and that's why this budget remains focused on securing the city region's economic recovery by prioritising investments in our infrastructure, in our skills, and certainly in our environment. And I'm determined that despite the huge challenges that the effects of the pandemic will place on Combined Authority budgets in the medium and perhaps even the longer term, that we will continue to support the city region's economy and to protect jobs throughout the 2021-2022 budget period. And so this budget makes special provision for a number of strategic priorities this year, but the most significant of those being the Mersey-Tidal Power Project, Liverpool City Region Digital Connectivity Programme, recovery and reform of the bus market, and support for Halton's year as Borough of Culture. But we also manage a significant portfolio of investments across the city region that aims to improve the economic growth and the inclusive growth and opportunities for our residents, businesses and the visitors alike. And so throughout this forthcoming year, we will see key delivery stages met at some great things like Shakespeare North Playhouse in Knowsley and Parkside, Link Road in St Helens, Glass Futures against St Helens, but we've got the Liverpool City Centre connectivity that's well underway now and making huge progress. We've got the redevelopment of Runcorn Station Quarter, Headbolt Lane, of course, which in Knowsley, that's one of the things that I'm really pushing forward with. Whittle Waters and the regeneration of Birkenhead. And then there is the Bootle and the Southport Strategic Investment Fund schemes. And of course, there's much more besides that. But while there's a lot to look forward to, we can't lose sight of the pressures that I mentioned earlier on our budgets. And so it is my role to remain vocal with government about their need to step up to the plate and to demonstrate that there is substance behind the promises, for instance, to level up economies. You know, if they're really serious about leveling up economies, what you would do is target funding towards those areas within the country that have issues that need to be resolved from decades of underinvestment. That's where I'd start the support. But it is about trying to get that funding for our essential public services in the city region and to support our local authorities who've literally been hollowed out for far too long and targeted unfairly by central government cuts. So with all of that, that's the headlines of what we're trying to do. John Fogarty, who's the Combined Authority Treasurer, is going to take us through the actual report. So over to you, John.
Thank you, Mayor. So yes, as you've just heard, the budget for next year, 2021-22, obviously a very difficult year to set a budget for. The challenge we've got, which we've set out in the report, is trying to balance the additional service pressures across all our services as a result of COVID and the need for the Combined Authority to be there in terms of, you know, to aid in any recovery, is to balance that pressure with a reduction in revenues and a reduction in our ability to raise revenues. Nowhere in the business is that more apparent than in transport, where I think it does warrant a couple of words on the situation around passenger transport in particular. And COVID has obviously had a huge impact on public transport and left a significant hole in our budget, and also in the budgets of rail and bus operators, which imposes a risk upon this Combined Authority. So obviously the public transport environment has changed beyond recognition, and the challenge is to try and maintain services with much reduced passenger revenues. At the moment, it's very difficult to forecast a recovery in that position. It won't occur until social distancing remains a requirement, and these problems look very much likely to outlast COVID. If the patterns of working and commuting continue beyond COVID, rail in particular looks vulnerable to changes in people's patterns of work, where they work and how they get there. And within this context, it introduces a significant risk to our rolling stock project, and the new trains will be coming into service next year. But the revenue they'll be able to attract, certainly in the early part of the year, is a lot less than we'd anticipated in the business case. So there's a risk there that we've had to manage within this budget. So yeah, the budget is set within a context of great uncertainty, and in effect, it's a holding position between where we're at now in the midst of COVID and in the midst of a further lockdown, and what we hope is a post-COVID environment. But obviously, as you'll appreciate, we can't really be certain when that will start or what that will look like. We've also had to be very conscious of the strain that COVID has put on our already strained local authority partners and their budgets, and also that of households, as the Mayor's mentioned. So because of that, we have taken the difficult decisions to freeze the transport levy, to freeze the Mayoral precept and tunnel tolls this year. So as I've stated earlier, the budget is a holding position. As better information emerges across the next financial year, it's likely that we'll need to revisit and revise this budget. But for the moment, the key recommendations within the budget will allow us to get to a sustainable financial position in 21-22. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, John. Any questions for John on the budget itself? Because we will then go into deciding on whether to agree to the recommendations bit by bit.
No one has indicated they wish to speak.
Thanks, Trudy. Okay, can we therefore agree the recommendations, and I will split them up. So first of all, on A, to note the report, is that agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
B, to agree the mayoral budget as presented at table 1 of the report.
Agreed.
Agree to freeze the mayoral precept at its 2020-2021 level, equivalent to £19 per year for a Band D property and £12.67 per year for a Band A property.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Approve the non-mayoral elements of the Combined Authority budget for this year.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Approve a freeze in the transport levy at £97.4 million for this financial year, 2021-2022.
Agreed.
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 Approve the payment of an optional grant of £93.1 million to Mersey Travel.
Agreed.
Note the level of authorised tolls for the Mersey tunnels as determined by the County of Merseyside Act 1980 as amended by the Mersey Tunnels Act 2004, with details on calculation methods explained in section 5 of this report.
Agreed.
Agreed.
And to accept the recommendations of the Liverpool City Region Combined Authorities Transport Committee and implement a schedule of tunnel tolls as contained in table 7 of this report.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, recommendations I through to R can be grouped together. Can that be agreed?
Agreed.
Yes, agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, so we've done all of the budgetary stuff right the way through to R. Thanks very much for that. Difficult
Metro
to
Mayor,
know.
sorry, it's Trudy. Just to confirm, Councillor Polehill has indicated in the chat that he would be abstaining on recommendations E and H on pages 13 of the agenda. Just wish the Combined Authority to be aware of that.
Yeah, that's noted and it'll be recorded in the minutes appropriately. Yeah, difficult set of circumstances this year, but I think we've done as well as anybody could ever expect out of the huge complexities that we're all having to deal with. We'll move on then to item 6, which is the Liverpool City Region Growth Platform funding, and it's to continue its inward investment service. An updated marketing strategy is in Appendix 2, and that's also been circulated. And to take us through this report, it's Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the report asks for the Combined Authority to approve to fund the Liverpool City Region Growth Platform to continue its inward investment service and deliver against the new post-COVID-19 marketing plan, which is in line with the existing service level agreement within the Combined Authority. As some background, in September 2020, Pete Salmon was appointed to ensure that the plan I've just mentioned is focused on directly targeting those business sectors where the city region has a clearly defined proposition, such as low carbon, health, digital and creative sectors. We must attract and support the right businesses into the region. The original funding approval of 1 year expired in March 2020. During COVID-19 lockdowns, the service was scaled back by the growth platform. So as I said earlier, a new marketing plan is now being developed to take account of both COVID-19 and Brexit changes. Mr. Mayor, inward investment is not at the front of people's minds right now. We're all trying to help our residents stay safe and protect their livelihoods. However, as we do move into recovery, investment from the right companies will become all the more important to helping our economy build back better. On my own patch on the Wirral, we're preparing Birkenhead for a new generation of investment, and I'm determined that local people will benefit from that. This project requests £1.1 million to continue the City Region's inward investment service, to continue our shared work in attracting new companies. It builds on an agreed strategy that our local authority officers have bought into. It also requires a growth platform as delivery partner to report its progress to us frequently. Finally, it links to our Good Business Festival, which is progressing plans for a follow-on event this year. I recommend this project in preparation for a robust economic recovery as soon as possible. As ever, I welcome the focus on continued deliverability and an opportunity to analyse the positive impact of schemes such as this. Mr Mayor, I'm asking colleagues to agree the recommendations as set out on page 63 of the report. Thank you.
Great. Any questions for Jeanette?
No one has indicated they wish to speak.
Thank you. Okay, can we agree the recommendations, as Councillor Williams has said, they're set out on page 63 of the report?
Agreed.
Agreed. Support the recommendations, Chair.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
7, the next report presents the Liverpool City Region's Fair Employment Charter for our approval, and the principle, of course, of fairness is one that we learn from the earliest age. We've all probably heard, haven't we, children saying, well, that's not fair. And it's all too easy to say that when we see some of the jobs and the places that people find themselves working hard in, that when things happen there, it can undermine fairness and become an issue of concern. So that's why I included a fair employment charter in my manifesto in 2017, and it's why I'm pleased to see this come for our approval today. I think, again, we're ahead of many areas in the whole country with doing this, and it shows a direction of travel for our combined authority. Kirsty is going to take us through the report.
Thank you. Yes, the report sets out the draft Fair Employment Charter for approval by the Combined Authority. This has been through 3 external consultations and it's been overseen by a stakeholder reference group that includes trade unions and employers. And I'd like to thank all those who gave it their time to help us put this together. We're proposing 2 levels of achievement in the Charter in the first instance, aspiring and accredited, with a 3rd level ambassador to be introduced at a later stage following further consultation. The outline of the Charter in the appendix shows that we have 4 themes. Just, fair and inclusive were included throughout, but over the last 10 months we've seen an increased focus because of COVID on the need for healthy and safe workplaces and employers who promote good physical and mental health, which is why we've included healthy as a 4th theme. Subject to approval of the Charter today, we will establish a multi-stakeholder group to support the application and accreditation process, and will open up for applications in the coming weeks. And the recommendations are set out on page 131 of the agenda pack.
Okay, any questions or issues for Kirsty?
No one has indicated they wish to speak.
I'm not sure that's true now because I'm just seeing that.
Councillor Williamson.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I think Jeanette has asked to come in. I think something else popped up earlier as well, if we could just recheck that. But first of all, Jeanette.
I think Lynn's before me, Steve, by the looks of it.
Well, we'll bring you in now and I'll try and find Lynn's bit. Okay, if you just do your bit.
Okay, well, it's just to obviously add my support wholeheartedly. You know, I've long said, and we've all agreed, that growth and regeneration has to benefit our residents and our workforce. And so this is a really welcome move forward. We have to look after our workers, and I know that we've had problems during COVID, and we will go from strength to strength with this charter. So just wanted to say thank you, Steve. You followed through on your manifesto pledge, and we're all completely supportive of this. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Williamson. Yeah, I think Lynn did indicate, is that right through the year?
That's correct, yes, yeah.
Okay, yeah, Lynn, if you want to come in now, sorry about that. It's
Thanks.
IT issues, it's not nothing else.
No problem. Thanks, Steve. I just wanted to thank yourself as Metro Mayor and the officers of the Combined Authority for inviting the Fairness and Social Justice Advisory Board to participate in the design of the Fair Employment Charter. We've been actively involved in the reference group throughout, and it's a real example of how FASJAB can have an input at an early stage into policies and procedures. This morning we had a specific item on this on our FASJAB agenda, and we welcome it. And in particular, we wanted to highlight, as well as the healthy workplaces aspects being really, really current now, the channel of work around inclusive workplaces, particularly at a time when we're seeing the impact on BME communities of unemployment now at 3 times higher in our city region than for white employees, and the impact that working at home and balancing childcare responsibilities has had on many working parents. The post-pandemic world of work is going to be very different than the world we had before, and that makes the Fair Employment Charter even more important going forward. So I'm delighted it's been signed off today, and I look forward to joining the launch event.
About to be signed off, Lynn. Yeah, but look, we need to recognise your part in all this as well. And you know, I'm not certain that without the drive and determination that you've put into trying to get us to where we are today, that we would be ready to sign this off if the leaders agree to that. So thank you, and I'd like that to obviously be reflected in the minutes as well. That's off all of the leaders in the Liverpool City region for all that great and consistent work of getting us to where we are. Any other questions or queries on that issue? No? Okay. So if there are no further questions, can we agree the recommendations as set out on page 131 of the report, please?
Agreed.
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 Now you can say it's agreed, Lynn. Okay, we'll move on to item 8, and this report presents a Freeport bid submission for our consideration, and Kirsty again is going to take us through the main body of the report, and then we'll open it up for any questions.
Yes, thank you. So in November, the government published a bidding prospectus for Freeports, which sets out a deadline for submissions of the 5th of February. We know it's a policy which is strongly supported by the Chancellor. As the paper sets out, we've been working with individual local authorities and other stakeholders, including university, college and business representation, to look at the pros and the cons of Freeports and to pull together what our strongest proposal would look like. As the paper sets out, there are some key opportunities linked to our sector and business strengths, but we're obviously also aware of the need to mitigate against any risks. This includes the importance of the green and low carbon agenda, including related to the transport of freight across the city region. But it's also very clear that this needs to be about adding value to the city region, not displacing activity from one part of the city region to another. The governance arrangements will be important here, including working those up as part of the next phase of bidding if we get through to that. We're also clear that this needs to be about high quality employment opportunities, not poor employment practices. Again, something we'll want to be clear about in how the Freeport is governed in the bid and with government. We do need to be conscious, though, both of the significant opportunities to the city region, but also the risk of competitive disadvantage compared to other areas if they are awarded Freeport status and we aren't. In terms of the Liverpool City region's proposition for a Freeport, again, that's set out in the paper, it would create a national hub for global trade and investment, promote regeneration, economic growth and job creation, and facilitate sustained innovation. It will be linked to our local industrial strategy strengths, particularly port and logistics, automotive, biomanufacturing and chemicals. And importantly, it would be a multi-gateway and multimodal Freeport, taking advantage of the city region's key strategic transport infrastructure. This includes the main port, but also links to the ship canal, rail-enabled sites and airports, all reflecting different markets and customers while supporting cleaner, efficient freight and logistics solutions. There are 3 key components to the bid. The first is a Freeport Management Centre, which would manage and administer the Freeport operation with a team located there. The second is tax sites. These will be Wirral Waters, Parkside and 3MG. Those 3 locations have been selected through a robust appraisal process from independent consultants and are those which we believe will have the greatest opportunity to support increased economic activity, attract inward investment and create inclusive and sustainable jobs. And importantly, each of those 3 sites have significant future developmental capacity. Finally, the custom sites, we're finalising a range of custom sites and each of those would have a clear relationship to the Freeport. Goods would be distributed into, within and out of the city region through various Freeport customs sites, most of which have the potential to be rail or water connected. There are 2 further elements to a bid. The first is innovation and decarbonisation. Our proposition needs to be strong in ensuring a Freeport becomes an enabler for decarbonisation and a centre for innovation. And we can draw on key assets here, including clean freight, offshore wind and supply chains, future fuels for shipping, and developing emerging hydrogen and tidal activities, which are future growth opportunities for the city region. And finally, supporting people and places. Underpinning all of this is regeneration, skills and jobs for our residents as part of our levelling up agenda. Our Freeport model will be shaped so that it is right for the Liverpool city region, speaking directly to the inclusive economy and green credentials that are set out both in our local industrial strategy and economic recovery plan. The next steps, if we do submit a bid, we would expect to hear in the March budget whether we've been successful in going through to the next stage, and that next stage will be to develop a full business case with government. That takes you through the key points from the paper, and the recommendations are set out in paragraph 2 of the paper on page 139.
Thanks, Kirsty. I think it was implicit in your presentation, but I just want to tease out just so that there's no room for doubt. Leaders will never support a submission that is a race to the bottom, and it's right to point out that workers' rights and protections would need to be secured in any future stages before we got to the point whereby we'd make a decision on this. This is about a submission. This is not about the decision. Any questions, queries, concerns on anything on item 8?
Chair?
Ian, yeah?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm not able to support this recommendation as it is, Chair. Within South Sefton, we're probably unique within the city region with the Bootle docks and the 2 corridors that lead from the docks and away into the rest of the city region and through the rest of the country, and have serious concerns about potential future decrease in air quality on those 2 corridors and an increased congestion on those corridors. So on that basis, I won't be supporting this particular item on our agenda, and when we come to voting, I would ask that my dissent is recorded.
Thanks, Councillor Mayor. We will certainly record any dissent. Anybody else? No? Okay. We'll go to the recommendations then as set out on page 139. Can those recommendations be agreed?
Agreed.
Okay.
Not agreed.
Yeah, I was going to. Yeah, I was going to do that. Make certainly, and so yeah, can we? The item is agreed with the dissension of Councillor Mayor, who wants that recorded. Okay. Item 9 is active travel, and it's a report that provides an update on what's called Active Travel Fund Tranche 2, and it sets out proposals on the disbursement of the funds to our constituent local authorities and Mersey Travel. And Councillor Robinson is going to take us through this report.
Yeah, thanks very much. Obviously, it's a brief report just for members to give them an update on the City Region's successful bid for Active Travel Tranche 2 funding. Obviously, the Active Travel Fund was something that was launched by the government at the start of the pandemic to support active travel infrastructure initiatives, things like pop-up cycle lanes. Originally, Tranche 1, we were successful in getting almost £2 million, and all of that has been successfully spent and implemented on cycling infrastructure infrastructure across the region. We're very pleased then that our submission of a bid to Tranche 2 has been successful in that we've been able to receive almost £8 million of funding, and that was 100% of the funding that we requested. We were very, very conscious that the government attached quite stringent conditions and measures to awarding of the funding based on our ability and track record of successful delivery of programmes in Tranche 1. So it's really testament to all the hard work by officers and partners right across all 6 districts of the city region that we've been able to get 100% of the funding that we requested, particularly because other parts of the country were marked down and did not receive the 100% of funding that they had requested. So very much sort of pleased that we're accepting this funding, distributing it across all 6 districts for some really good, powerful active travel and pop-up cycling measures, and looking forward to seeing those delivered in the coming weeks and months to sort of encourage even more cycling and walking across our region. Thank you.
After sitting down for 11 months and not being actively, I'm looking forward to perhaps getting back on a bike, and we'll have to organise something, and I'm sure many people are taking advantage of those active travel corridors. Are there any questions for Liam on this?
So far, no one has indicated they wish to speak.
Okay, I think it's good news. Can we therefore agree the recommendations are set out on page 149 of the report, please?
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed.
10 is the EU Transition Readiness Funding, and it's our final report, but it's a procedural report which seeks our approval to accept the grant award of £181,050 to the Liverpool City Region Growth Platform, and the fund is intended to support activities to provide outreach and engagement with businesses on EU transition issues. Fairly straightforward, but happy for any questions if anyone's got any.
No one has indicated they've got any questions or comments.
Yeah, we normally don't have many questions about accepting money. It's we need more of it. Can we agree the recommendations are set out on page 161?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, 11 is public question time, Trudy, of which we've had nothing in the timescale.
That's correct, yet no, none received.
And 12 is petitions and statements, of which again we haven't had any submitted.
That's also correct, yes.
Item 13 are the minutes from the meetings of overview and scrutiny on the 4th of November last year, of the Transport Committee on the 5th of November and of the 10th of December. Liam, anything on the Transport Committee minutes that we need to be made aware of?
A couple of things I'll just draw members' attention to. Obviously, at the meeting in November, we agreed the prices for the multimodal multi-operational ticketing suite, so saveaways and trios and things like that. But something that I know is of great interest to all members of the Combined Authority and many, many residents is that we also agreed the City Region's consultation response to the government's consultation on pavement parking. Being very, very brief, we've strongly supported what is known as option 2, which is about getting much more significant powers to all of our local authorities to be able to enforce problems with pavement parking. However, we don't support a London-style complete ban on pavement parking, mainly because of the sort of makeup of some of our traditional terrace streets and the fact that we need to kind of be pragmatic in how we deal with pavement parking in those very tight streets and difficult locations. So wanted to flag that because I know that's something that yourself and many of the leaders get regular comments about.
Yeah, and we are collectively opposed to anybody who obstructs the curtilage or the pavements and force people, especially parents perhaps with pushchairs and prams, disabled people who may be in wheelchairs who have to go around it, or a myriad of other things. Even cyclists. I know they shouldn't be on it, but if they're going somewhere, they wouldn't be forced not to cycle down the pavement, but to go round to get to wherever they're going to. So there's a whole host of of different practices that we believe that a legal obstruction of pathways should be strictly enforced upon. But of course, because of the architecture of many of our streets, as you said, Councillor Robinson, some of our terrace streets, we were hearing before from, I think, Councillor Mayer saying that in some streets in Sefton, for instance, an ambulance or perhaps a fire engine wouldn't be able to get up and down the streets unless people squeeze a little bit either side, and that's the difference. What we're talking about is the thoughtlessness and the irresponsibility and sometimes the recklessness of just abandoning cars on pavements and forcing people to around them into the road. So yeah, I think the option is probably the sensible one to take forward. And of course, if people do have issues around wanting a better understanding, I know Councillor Robinson, you said that they can write to you at Man Island and you'll respond to them queries and concerns.
More than happy to.
Always. With item 15, the minutes can just be noted. That therefore concludes this combined authority meeting, and the next meeting of the LCR CA will take place on the 26th of February 2021 at 1 o'clock. And with that, I'll thank everybody for their attendance and declare the meeting closed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.